Thanks for having us. My name is Betancourt. Samuel Rivera. We're both from PR. Went to school here. Work in a company called InfoScout in the Bay Area, just like Burnett. I'm a product lead engineer over there. My role is mostly a full stack developer, a little bit of PM, a little bit of architecture and front end. I'm a developer at heart, so that's what I do, and that's kind of what I like to do. So today, hopefully it's not going to be too technical. We're going to talk about how to do async, or basically asynchronous API calls in Redux, right? This kind of requires for you to know a little bit of React.js and for you to know Redux mostly. So let's get started. Quickly, show of hands, who's used React before Redux? We got about 4 people. All right, we'll make it happen. Let's see. So React is just a quick intro there. React.js is a web framework that allows you to display data, but it uses a virtual DOM instead of the actual DOM, right? So when you're displaying data in that HTML page, it's going to do all the rendering in a virtual DOM, and it's going to take the old state and the new state. It's going to diff those two, and then it's going to render a new thing. Much faster, right? And much more efficient in terms of processing the data and the load that it puts on the DOM itself. Not necessarily on the browser, memory, and CPU, but on the DOM itself. In React, you can handle state using just the library, but things can get a little messy. If the application is big, you have a lot of components, you have a lot of pages, even if you have like an app that's conceptually an app of apps, state management gets a little messy. So Redux comes into the picture, and effectively, what in Redux, what you're trying to do is handle the entire state in one single JavaScript object. So it's just one object, it's called a store, you put everything in there, and then that's where you're gonna handle throughout the entire application lifecycle process. How do you manage that? So you use actions and reducers, right? It's a very functional programming-based concept. You have actions that's gonna tell you how to modify the state, and then you get a reducer that will consume that action and do something with it, and then spit out another state, another object. You can use Redux in any framework. Use it in Angular, you can use it in React. Ember, I don't think it's a good idea to use it in Ember. Okay, I'm getting an approval back there, so you can probably use it in Ember as well. Thank you. So effectively, we're trying to handle here, when you're doing asynchronous API calls, it's just solving a problem of mutation and asynchronicity, right? Mutation, modifying the state. Asynchronicity, you ask for something, you sit back here, wait for it for a little bit, and then it gets back to you. Or it fails. Hopefully, right, it's successful and it doesn't fail. React handles this problem at the view layer, and then Redux handles that just outside React, so it's not intertwined. 3 core principles, kind of went through this a little bit. It's a single source of truth. If you ever use like Reflux or Flux, it has many stores. In Redux, you only have one store, right? One object, that's it. State is read-only. That's kind of very, very important, right? You can only modify the state and produce a new state. So it's immutable. Immutable means you take this thing, you modify it, create a new one. You just don't modify this thing that you had already. And the changes that you do have to be done with pure functions. What does that mean? So in a reducer, you can't really do any API calls, anything that basically produces a different effect. For a given input, it has to be the exact same output. Just think about it that way. Same input, given input, same output, no matter how many times you do that. So that's Redux. 3 key things, right? Single source of truth, one object, state is read-only, changes are made with pure functions. And if pure functions kind of scare you a little bit, it's just a function. It's just nothing crazy. Easy, simple function. All right, synchronous actions in Redux. You're trying to, let's pretend you have a little app where you just click plus or minus. You're trying to increment, and then you click that little button that you're going to have in your web page. It's going to send an object which has the actions, the string increment, right? And then it's going to send that bad boy. And then the reducer to the right side is going to take it, and it's going to go into that first case statement. It's going to go in there, take the state. The state is just a number, right? And it's going to increment it, and it's going to reduce it. It's going to return it. But it returns a new object, right? So it's a new state. It's completely immutable. And now you want to do something else. You want to decrease it. So you click the minus little bottom of your HTML page. It goes into the second function, decrement. It's going to send that object to the reducer. goes to that switch statement, takes a look at it. Oh, I just need to go down one, goes down one, returns a new object. Boom, done, simple. But not everything, obviously. I know I have a few web developers around here. In the web is synchronous. Some of these things, you just need to wait. You send it, and then you have to wait, which is basically what you're trying to do, right? So let's say you open any page, facebook.com or Amazon, I don't know, whatever it is. And then sometimes you get your little animation there. So they're just sitting there waiting for you. So that's a request. That's an action request. Let's start thinking about this in terms of actions in the Redux world. We're going to have 3 actions: the request, if it works, the success, second action, or if it fails, the error action or the fail action, however you want to call it. And that's kind of fundamentally what we're going to talk about for the next kind of 15 minutes, hopefully, if I have that time. Looking at Emmanuel here, he's kind of keeping the time for me. So what do we have? In Redux, I don't know, Redux came out in May 2015, and people just went crazy and wrote libraries left and right. When on GitHub, it's like, oh my God, there's like easily about 8 different ways in which you can do this, right? So the first one that kind of came out by the actual creator of Redux was Redux Thunk. Thunk is a concept in functional programming, which is basically a function that takes a function and returns another function. Oh my God, too many functions. Okay, let's do that again. It takes a function through a function and then just returns another one. The cool thing about it is that halfway through, you can just pass more parameters or modify that function, right, in some way. It's just basically delaying the execution of the function. What's that, 3? Left? I got it, good, thank you. Right, so then Thunk, what it does is that it provides the dispatch object. So in Redux, you need to dispatch action somehow. Dispatch does that for you. And then it passes the dispatch to a function, and it sends it out down the pipe. And someone else will take care of that. And this is kind of how it looks. A little bit of code, more code. We like code. Here, we're going to fetch posts from somewhere. I don't know, Reddit, GitHub, think about some website. 3 actions, once again, the ones in green: request, success, failure. So it takes, you see in the return statement, the first one, it has the dispatch, and it's just going to dispatch of type request, and it calls fetch API, which is some API library that we're using, and it's going to call /posts, and that returns a promise, and if it works, then it dispatches a success action, and if it fails, it goes to the catch statement, it dispatches a failure action. There's a more kind of compact, simpler way of doing this. You can use another library called Redux API middleware. It's out there. I wouldn't recommend using it. We're using it, but we're using it because I kind of rewrote it and did my own, because it basically allows you to do on success and on failure instead of this one that doesn't really. So you have that thing that's a call API. That's a symbol in JavaScript, if you know what that is. It just basically is a string, and then it takes a string and then it does 3 things. In this case, same thing: request, success, failure. To be honest, just sugarcoating. It looks better. It's easier to read. The problem with this library, it's really hard to test, right? Because you got to test every single function, every single case in that. So Sammy is going to talk about some other ways in which we can do this.
Hi, the second option is Redux Saga. This one, their goal is to make side effects easier and better. So right away we can see that they have very marketing, that Redux Thunk. So in this one, it's easier to test than Thunk, the first one. It behaves basically like a separate thread in JavaScript. We know that it's single-threaded, but it creates a parallel thread in the execution, and it's waiting for actions to continue the execution. And they do this using ES6 generators. It's a function that you can stop and then continue its execution after when an action or an effect is happening. Saga mainly consists of 2 main functions. One is a watcher, and the second one is the worker. So we have here the same example. From Redux Saga, we're getting the delay to do like at the bounce. When the person clicks a button, we can wait to see if the person just don't click that button again. So first, we will see the watcher. The first one will take the latest request action, just like the previous example: request, success, and failure. So we will take the latest request and we will call fetch post. Fetch post is the worker function in this Saga. In fetch post, we will delay 500 milliseconds. Then we'll try to do a call to the API. So we use yield. Yield is the way that the generator waits, stop there the execution, do the call to the API to fetch for the post, and if it's successful, it will put an action to the store, a dispatch an action, a success one, and pass as a payload the post response that was received. If it fails, it will, the error is caught, and then it will put the failure with the error that was received. This one is much better to test. Right there you see like put instead of dispatch. Dispatch, you can use it, but it's not recommended because when you're going to test, you have to mock that function in your test. So you just use put here in your worker, and then when you're testing, you're comparing two objects. An object with an instruction that will be put, a function, an action that will be success or failure. The third option is Redux Observable. This one, the goal of them is to compose and cancel async actions, creating side effects and more using observables. Observables is based on RxJS, is a library for reactive programming. This approach is more functional. And the main component for observables is an epic. So we'll create an epic, and in that epic, what is a stream of objects. So it's like an array, but with a time dimension. So in that object, we will have zero values, one values, or more than one values. And in theory, you receive actions, and it returns actions. So that the outermost function in that observable have to be an action. It has a type and a payload. Observables are being standardized for ECMA script, so it may be included later in browsers. And how it looks like is more readable, more functional. We here have the same thing: a request, a success, and a failure actions. First, it will wait for an action of type request. Then it will debounce for 500 milliseconds, just as the previous one, as the Saga. It will merge map. Merge map, what it does is like map a stream in an asynchronous way to the previous stream. So here we see that observable.from will do an API call to the post, and the from will create a new observable. So we are using .map after that, and .map will map that stream in a synchronous way. We have to wait until that call finishes, and then we will post those, put that action, dispatch that action of success with the payload that was received, with the response that was received from the server. If it fails, then we will dispatch a failure action with the error that was received. So let's see the comparison of these three libraries. The first one is the learning curve. The easiest one is Thunk, but it's not as powerful as the other two options. So here, if you know RxJS, reactive programming, then the best one to use is Observables, because it's more powerful, more readable, more functional. The adoption, Saga and Observables are being used and maintained by Facebook and Netflix respectively. And for testing, the best one is Redux Saga, because you're testing objects, you're comparing objects. So the best one for test is Saga, then Observable is really difficult to test. They don't have any documentation for testing. The first one is really tedious because you have to mock all the functions that you're using in your Thunk. So I will give you with Edward for a summary.
How are we doing in time? We got 2 minutes at least? Oh, we're doing great. Beautiful. All right, so a few key takeaways. If none of these made sense to you, hopefully some of you did. You can learn more about Redux in their documentation. It's pretty good. So reduxjs.org, I think it is. So Redux was basically adopted by Facebook when its creator, Dan Abramov, he's kind of a small celebrity in the front end development community. He joined Facebook, and then Redux immediately just became part of kind of the Facebook projects that are maintained as part of the React kind of ecosystem. A few ways that you can do this: asynchronous actions in React, or I guess using Redux, I should say. Thunk, we talked about that. We talked about Sagas, Observables. There's many more. Google it. There's Redux Async Connect. There's I don't know. There's probably about 5 more. We think that these are kind of the top ones. The easiest ones to work with and to test also. That's kind of a big component in our team. At InfoScout, we use Redux Thunk with a custom Redux API middleware and Redux Sagas. Slowly moving to Redux Sagas. Why? Because you can test them easily, right? If you can test it, then you can repeat the process over and over again. Redux Observables is very attractive. RxJS is kind of definitely gaining a lot of traction out there. It already has a lot of traction. This guy, Jay Phelps at Netflix, if you kind of know who that guy is, he's kind of the big proponent behind Redux Observables, kind of a core contributor for the library and for RxJS. Point being, if your company or shop, it's trying to follow a functional reactive approach, that's probably the way to go. And that's all we got. Thank you guys.